Here is one move every playoff losing team should make going into next season. Starting off, we have the Houston Texans, who did lose in the divisional round of the playoffs to the Patriots. And I think they should probably consider moving on from CJ Stroud. This might come as a slight surprise to some, but he looked really, really bad in both their playoff games, and the defense really carried this team throughout their playoff run. And I think it might be time to consider moving on from CJ Stroud. Now, that move could be through free agency or through the draft. If they wanted to give CJ Stroud at least another year, they could consider drafting a quarterback or signing a quarterback that is a little bit younger in free agency. This is the list of the quarterbacks that are available this offseason in free agency if they do not re-sign with their current team. And it is a short list. Daniel Jones, Aaron Rodgers up top. I think if Rodgers does play at all, he will be back in Pittsburgh. But Daniel Jones could be a good option. Even someone like Russell Wilson or Kenny Pickett, if they wanted to give him a shot in free agency, they could do that. Or they could completely go a different route and they could take one of the top quarterbacks in this year's draft. Unlikely they will land Fernando Mendoza, who is projected to go number 1, but they could swoop in and take a guy like Ty Simpson, or wait and take a guy like Cade Klubnik or Garrett Nussmeier, depending on what type of player they're looking for. I think that could be a good option for Houston. Now, moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think it's time for them to find their true franchise quarterback now that they kind of figured out that Aaron Rodgers could not get the job done with the Steelers this season. And that could be in-house with Will Howard, who they currently have on their roster. They could look to give him a shot, or they could, again, turn to free agency like the Texans and try to sign a guy like Daniel Jones, even a guy like Russell Wilson or Marcus Mariota. I don't know if that's finding their franchise quarterback, but it's at least changing up their offense and giving them a little bit more juice than Aaron Rodgers provided this past offseason. If they wanted to really find their guy, I think they're going to have to do it through the draft. I'm not sure that any of these free agents are going to get them over the hump. Unless they somehow landed Daniel Jones, I don't necessarily see that being the best fit for Daniel Jones, but I guess that could happen through free agency. Overall, I think the Steelers look to draft their franchise quarterback, whether they stick with Aaron Rodgers for one more season or they transition to Will Howard. Even if they do transition to Howard, I don't know if he's the guy. They might have to look through the draft to find their franchise quarterback. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, I do think they need to draft or sign a stud offensive lineman, preferably through the draft. They're already building a super young core of players, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I think it would be in their best interest to draft an offensive lineman. They did look pretty good in their wild card game against the Bills. They did end up losing that game, and the pressure did really get to Trevor Lawrence in that one. They did put up 24 points, but I think he threw a couple interceptions in that loss to the Bills, and I think shoring up the offensive line will help them significantly going forward. If we look at the draft this upcoming cycle, there are a few offensive linemen, offensive tackles that will be drafted in the first round. You can see their rank over here on the left side of the column. If any of the top 5 offensive tackles could land in Jacksonville, I think it would be really beneficial for Trevor Lawrence going into next season. They're all pretty good options, and I think they need to shore up that offensive line in order to keep Trevor Lawrence healthy and make sure that he has enough time to throw the ball next season. Now, moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers, I think, again, just like the Jaguars, I think they need to sign a offensive lineman. Now, I would lean towards a veteran offensive lineman just because their offense is a little bit older than the Jaguars. I feel like that might fit their offense a little bit better. And there is several pretty good options in free agency when talking about offensive linemen. Rasheed Walker could be available. These guys are not guaranteed to be available, but there's a possibility that they will be available in free agency. Also, guys like Tyler Linderbaum from Baltimore, even Connor McGovern from Buffalo. So going down this list of the top available free agents, there are several guards and tackles that could be available to sign via free agency. And I think it would be in the Chargers' best interest to land one of those guys for not only for Justin Herbert, but for their offense in general. I think they really got blown up and exposed by New England in that game this postseason. And it was not even close. Their offensive line couldn't do anything, scored 3 points in that game against the Patriots. And I really think they need to focus on finding, a veteran offensive lineman who can help protect Justin Herbert. And really same thing from the Patriots' perspective. I think adding a veteran offensive lineman would be in their best interest. It really got exposed in the Super Bowl. They could not block anyone on Seattle's pass rush. It was pretty much a disaster for Drake May. I know he was having some issues with his shoulder or whatnot, but he really didn't have time to throw regardless of that issue, that injury. And them finding a guy in free agency just like the Chargers, probably going to be their best option, just to see some of the top tackles that could be available during free agency. And there's a couple guys that are still relatively young, 28, 29, that even down here, 26, 28, Elijah Tucker, David Edwards, guys that could provide some depth to their offensive line and a big boost as well, because they really did not look too good in that Super Bowl against Seattle. They really could not stop them at all, and they're going to need to shore that up next season going into 2026. Now, the Buffalo Bills, I think, should look to add either a wide receiver one or a run stuffer on the defensive line. Their defense played good at times, played bad at times during the season. The one thing that they got exposed with was through the run. Most rushers kind of destroyed the Bills this season. I know Travion Henderson in division killed them a couple times. Breece Hall killed them a couple times. So I think a run stuffer could be a good option for the Bills. Also, a wide receiver one. They really, since losing Stephon Diggs, they really have not had a wide receiver one in their offense. And if we look at free agency, there is several guys that could potentially slide in as wide receiver one in that offense. Now, I'm not saying that these guys are superstars by any means. If we do go over here and look, there are a couple guys up top: Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, Debo Samuel. I'm not saying that these guys are complete studs, but they could be a better option than what they had previously. Even someone like Rashid Shaheed or Alec Pierce potentially. And if they did not want to go that route, they could hop over here and go through the draft. Now, they don't have a very high pick in the draft, but they could potentially trade up for, someone like, probably not Jordan Tyson. He probably will get taken well before they'll be able to trade up. But down here, Mekhi Lemon from USC, Casey Conception from Texas A&M. These are both guys that they could look to draft. Not sure I love either of those guys. I feel like wide receiver ones are generally 6'1", 6'2", 6'3". Carnell Tate would be a phenomenal option for the Buffalo Bills. I could see that working out really well for them going forward. So if they could land someone like that, I think they should do that in the draft. And then the Denver Broncos were so close to going to the Super Bowl. They were right there. Bo Nix got hurt, which kind of killed their season. Ended up playing New England, and New England barely beat them. I think with a healthy Bo Nix, I think they'll be right back to where they were this past season in 2025, 2026. But adding a top-tier tight end or wide receiver to that offense would help significantly. There are plenty of guys via the draft that they could look to. We just went over a couple of the top guys draft. They're not going to have a very high pick, but down here in the Conception, Cooper Jr. range, Denzel Boston range, I think grabbing one of those guys to slide in that offense would be a significant help. They already, I feel like, shored up. Quarterback shored up. Running back, RJ Harvey looks pretty good. It looks like he could be a young stud going forward. And their defense does not have many holes. That's a really, really good defense in Denver. And as long as they can retain most of those defenders, I think adding to the offense is more significant than adding to their defense. Now, moving over to the Chicago Bears, I think it would be in their best interest to add to the offensive line, just like several teams we touched on. Offensive line is hard to come by, especially good ones. I think they should probably look to do it through the draft. There are several different offensive linemen in the offensive tackles, guards as well in the draft that should be really good in the pros. Obviously, they are going to need to be developed, but if we look here just at the top couple offensive linemen in the draft this upcoming season, I think one of these guys will end up landing in Chicago just to protect Caleb Williams, also help with the run. They looked pretty good in the playoffs. They just could not get over the hump. Lost to the Rams in the divisional round of the playoffs, and it was only by 3. It was a really close game, went to overtime, and they really had a chance to win. If they can score more than 17 points, they obviously win that game, and I think an offensive tackle would go a long way in helping them protect Williams and move the ball downfield next season. Now, for the San Francisco 49ers, I think they need to upgrade their defense and most importantly, their pass rush. That really was their problem this postseason. They did end up beating the Eagles in the wild card round, but then really, really struggled to the Seahawks pretty much right off the bat. And obviously, the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. They were the best team in the NFL, but they got blown out. And I think their defense really struggled. They were not even in it from the jump. I think they need to definitely take a long look at free agency and either find an edge rusher or someone who can rush the quarterback and put pressure on the offense, because they really did not have that going into this past season, and it really showed that they did not have that. I see down here, Vitor Gross-Matos is available in free agency. I think they should look to re-sign him and then add a piece up here, whether that's a veteran like Joey Bosa or Khalil Mack. I'm not sure how realistic that is, but if they could do something like that, that might help them get over that edge from last season. For the Philadelphia Eagles, I really think it just comes down to getting their offense in check. Like, their offense was so out of sorts this past season, and obviously that starts with the offensive coordinator. They did let go their offensive coordinator and brought in a new one. The Eagles brought in Sean Mannion as their offensive coordinator going into next season, who was the quarterback's coach in Green Bay. I think they definitely needed to change that up in Philadelphia, because what they were doing previously was not working last season. And A.J. Brown was not too happy. Jalen Hurts had some times where he was not too happy. So I think if they can get that in check, their defense is good enough to get them to the playoffs. I think they need to put the offensive pieces together. They have great players. It's just they could not get over the hump. They lost to the 49ers in the first round, in the wild card round this past season. I think if they can figure that out, they will have a good shot at making a run in 2026-2027 season. The Carolina Panthers actually looked like they were turning a corner going into the playoffs. They looked really good. I will say I never really trusted Bryce Young. I still don't really trust Bryce Young, but he did look good at times late in the season and in the playoffs as well in that wild card game. There was times where he showed flashes against the Rams, and they actually beat the Rams in the regular season. I think Tetairoa McMillan is a great wide receiver. I think they have some other pieces there like Jalen Coker, but adding another veteran tight end or wide receiver to that offense might be in the Panthers' best interest. So if we go to free agency, the upcoming free agency, at least this offseason, there are several guys that could be available for the Carolina Panthers. I did already see that David Njoku is not returning to Cleveland. That could be a solid option at tight end. Imagine that offense with Njoku, Tet McMillan, Jalen Coker. It just provides another weapon for them to use in the passing game for Bryce Young. I think that could really, really elevate that roster. If they could land a guy, another piece too, any of these top tight ends are solid options for the Carolina Panthers. Now, moving on to the Los Angeles Rams, I do think they need to sign or draft the best available defensive player. Regardless of where that is, their defense was the part of their team that got exposed this season. Their offense, they scored points. They scored plenty of points. If you go to the games they played in the playoffs this postseason, they put up 20, beat the Bears, put up 34, beat the Panthers. They put up 27 and lost to the Seahawks by 4 points. So their offense really was not the problem at all. I think they need to go to either free agency or the draft and find the best defensive player. If I sort here by overall defense, you can see up at the top there are a couple key players and good players that they could sign to their roster. I think they need to make a big move, whether that's in the draft or in free agency here. They need to do something to shore up their defense, or you can score a ton of points, but when it comes to the playoffs, if you can't stop the other team, they're going to be able to score points too. So they need to shore up the defense in order to get back to where they were this past season. And I think if they do that, they could make a deep run. I know Matt Stafford said he is coming back next season, and obviously that's a key piece to their offense. So if they can put all that together, I think they could make a run at the Super Bowl again. And the last team here in the NFC is the Packers. And I think they really just need to get healthy. They had a bunch of key injuries down the stretch. Obviously, the biggest one, Micah Parsons, who was traded there this past season and then tore his ACL or Achilles, one of those, and obviously could not return. But their secondary also really got exposed as well. So their secondary really got exposed. It was the dagger against the Bears in the playoffs, that bomb touchdown, and then the other late touchdown that Caleb Williams threw too. So I think shoring up the secondary will be a priority for the Packers this upcoming season. And if we look here, obviously Trayvon Diggs, that would be nice to have back. One of these other top 10 guys, I think they should look to add, or they could look to go to free agency. If we go to cornerbacks in this upcoming draft class, there is a couple guys that are projected to be first-round talents. If any of those guys slide, I think they should pick one of those guys up. It should be a huge priority. They couldn't really stop many teams, especially through the air. If they can do that and they can get healthy, get Micah Parsons back, I think their offense will be good to go, and they have a good shot at making a run in the 2026-2027 season. And that's going to wrap up the video today. It's one move I think every NFL team should make going into next season. If you did like the video, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and I will be back shortly with more off-season NFL content.